Okay, so this is the last thing, and I think John was hitting on this a minute ago. What are the metrics that we're going to use to evaluate how successful this sucker is, right? Because it's all about the numbers, ain't it? John, you and me, it's about profit and loss. That's it, man. I mean, if it don't make money, we ain't doing it. Okay. So how can you tell? Okay, so I know you guys are all familiar with this, but a lot of people listen to this podcast later, and we'll be talking about key performance indicators. Oftentimes you hear me call them KPIs. So when you think about the KPIs, what are the key performance indicators that would tell you your newsletter is successful? Because it's delivered email, they're the same for email marketing as they are for your newsletter because your newsletter is truly email marketing. Okay. So what should we look at first? How about open rate? How many people did you send it to opened it? Okay, that would be something, right? And what if your open
Yeah.
rate, forgive me for using a four-letter word, sucked? Then maybe that was a six-letter word. So maybe what happened is that your subject line was no good.
Yeah.
Okay, because you know what? If it's a snoozer subject line, they ain't gonna open it. You're in there competing with 6,000 other pieces of email. Remember when we used to hear this, you've got mail, and we ran over there to open it. Well, them days are probably gone, don't y'all think? Now we have
Mhm.
6 spam blockers trying to keep people out of our email box. However, so your subject line has to be catchy and has to get an open rate. Well, how about once you get an open rate, how about did they click on anything in there? Hopefully they'd have something to click on.
Yeah.
And then how many of those people took action? How many of those people came on and bounced right back off? So there's several little key indicators that we can look at that come up in your analytics that will exactly tell us that. Did they click on a link and go to your webpage? And then we can look in Google Analytics and see how many people are coming from our email, our newsletter email, over to our website. So all of that data is there. So what happens is if our open rate is terrible, then we need to work on our subject lines. But if we're not getting any clicks on our links, what's the problem there? Maybe that's not attractive. Maybe they don't feel it's congruent. Maybe that's not an offer they're interested in. Okay, so we can make a lot of business decisions by looking at the KPIs, and we'll do a whole nother episode on KPIs. But there are ways to track and tell, is the newsletter making you money or not? And then there's intangibles. I've been reading your newsletter for 12 years. Okay, it's pretty hard to quantify that.
Mhm.
That is a long-term win. I mean, but if they're probably not showing up, but they're probably showing up as a daily view. But you can see with analytics, you can see where the traffic's coming from. You can look at demographics. I mean, you can look at every informational piece that you want to know about it. But there's usually about 6 pieces of information that I want to
The
know
one
about
that
it.
always kicks my butt is who the heck unsubscribed? I want to know.
Unsubscribe is a good thing. And I'll tell you what happens. Dill, I have them put unsubscribe on our newsletter right at the very top of the page. Right where it says who it's from, I put unsubscribe there. You know why? Because if you're not interested, you're not my prospect. Okay. And if you're not interested, I don't want you to promote me as spam because that hurts me with Google. So here's the unsubscribe button. You don't got to go anywhere to find it. It's right up here in your face.
Right.
Okay. So I mean, the other thing about it is look at list segregation. Okay, so we have a master list. Okay, so if you're getting the newsletter, you're staying in the master list, but you're also coming over to the newsletter list. So if you unsubscribe from the newsletter list, you haven't unsubscribed from our database. You've just unsubscribed from the newsletter list because maybe their mailbox is full, or maybe the information isn't resonating with them. They just didn't want that information for whatever reason, but you're still in our database. Okay, you're just not getting the newsletter. Okay, and the only way you could get the newsletter would be sign up for it with a different email address. You couldn't come back in that list once you've unsubscribed. So list segregation is a whole another thing. I would segregate my list by inspections that I did. So now this is a little bit more technical, and this is not something we do every day for you. But how about every first-time home buyer that you had? Would you put them in a separate list? You still have them in the master list. But would you segregate them out to maybe get them some different information? And how about everybody who was a move-up buyer? Could you segregate those? And then everybody who was a seasoned buyer, could you segregate those? Now you're really talking about targeting your audience, aren't you? I mean, that is the ultimate target audience. Okay, because we know that all three of those informational needs are somewhat different or informational wants. Okay, so we could really, we call that cutting the data. We could cut that data down to where you could really highly specifically target. How about people that were new construction buyers? That would be a separate one that we could do.
Or investors.
Investors, very good, Brandon. Investors. So cutting that data, but don't have a master list, and then have separate lists for other things that you're doing. Okay, because the last thing we want them to do is unsubscribe to the newsletter, and they take you out of your master list. They just didn't want the newsletter. They don't want to be banned from you. You know, there's other things that they're interested in, workshops, or they're interested in whatever for us.
Because if you remove them totally, they can never come back on your get response or constant contact
with that email address, they can still come back.
with
They
that
have to use a
email
different
address.
email
But
address,
if they just unsubscribe from your newsletter, they're still in your, like Ken said, the master list.
So list segregation is a very, very important thing.